Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 7 of my new audio broadcast, Talking About Horses. In these broadcasts, I try to bring you some of the best riders, horsemen, trainers, advocates, and thought leaders in the horse industry for tips, insights, and stories. You can listen at home, at work, in the car, or in the saddle, either through Facebook, YouTube, or by downloading the podcast from the iTunes Store. Today, I'm pleased to bring to the broadcast Miss Tinia Creamer, founder of Heart of Phoenix Equine Rescue, based in Shoals, West Virginia. Tinia, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Okay, so let's jump right into it. So, Heart of Phoenix, who is Heart of Phoenix? How did you get your start? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I travel around all over this coast, and people will see me, and they're like, "You're Heart of Phoenix," and I'm flattered by that, but actually Heart of Phoenix is about 80 different people that volunteer or serve on the board or train for us or work with us in some capacity throughout Appalachia. And so the history of Heart of Phoenix comes through a mare that I picked up in Lincoln County, West Virginia. It was an extreme cruelty case. I did this on my own. The mare ultimately had to be euthanized, and at the end of her story, I had not named this horse because I felt like she was not going to make it. When the vet recommended we go ahead and put her down, that was the name, Phoenix, which has kind of been a funny thing because people always assume that means we're in Arizona, but it actually is the proverbial rising from the ashes play on words.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we are named after that first personal rescue that I did many years ago. And it grew from that horse to kind of building a social media presence on my own, and then through a couple of years, people wanted to help, and people that were donating became fosters, and they became board members, and we became a nonprofit. And it, for the longest time, we were the only 501c3 organization in the entire state of West Virginia serving as a horse rescue or horse advocacy organization of any type. So.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So it started just as your efforts kind of doing your Good Samaritan deal, and now you said over 80?
Over 80 volunteers at this point, and it really started with me looking around and saying what you should never say, why isn't somebody doing something about this? And right. I thought, oh no, Tinia, you've done it now. And there was clearly no one even thinking in that vein in the entire state. And unfortunately, which you know, having visited here, it's an extremely impoverished region of the country, the most. And horses suffer unspeakably, and I'm willing to say more than anywhere else in the United States. We see the worst of the worst here. And to think that for so many years there was no one is extremely sad to me. But as soon as we started working, it was really clear that there were people that just needed some type of leadership, and that's what the organization has given people, and they really did want to see something, and they just didn't know how to help. And so we've seen leaps and bounds of improvement in various ways over the years since we were established.
That's fantastic. So the community has really jumped on board with the efforts then.
I mean, they really seem to have, and I will say, and your listeners will know, rescue in general has a bit of a bad reputation because you get, just as with anything, you get a lot of bad people, but you also get a lot of well-meaning people that don't really know how to operate what essentially is a nonprofit business. And so people really approach new rescue with hesitation, and they should. It took a while for people to see this, that Heart of Phoenix was not only doing good things, but that we were going to be here for many, many years and become a major player in the equine industry in Appalachia. So once they saw we can trust this organization, at that point, yes, they became very supportive, and that's when we went from 12 volunteers to 50 to 60, 70, 80, and so forth.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, and I mean, so pretty early on here in the broadcast, we're kind of touching on, and you're bringing to mind for me some interesting thoughts that until I had worked with a couple different rescues, of course, Heart of Phoenix, and also I've worked with Gentle Giants in Maryland. We see, or I've seen, just through your group and through Gentle Giants and just a general awareness through some of the other humane societies and things like that I've done some work with, we see, like you said, kind of non-reputable rescues, almost glorified hoarder situations. And then that seems to kind of turn the tables back over onto you guys, because then you get, the reputable rescue organizations end up getting twofold the horses that you would maybe normally get, because they're being taken from folks like that. And then this, I'm assuming, is where, like you said, folks weren't real trusting to begin with.
Well, and it happens so often. And while here in West Virginia, when we really came onto the scene, the other rescues that had existed previously had already closed. We really felt that hostility because of what had happened previously. One of the biggest seizures in the state of West Virginia's history was in northern West Virginia a few years before we became an organization, and it was over 100 horses seized from a rescue. So we really had to fight a pretty steep battle, and nationally, it happens all of the time, and it is essentially just hoarding, and people, sometimes they mean well, sometimes they really are looking just to scam people out of money. I mean, it really varies, but intentions often start as very good intentions, and it just comes back to, you can look around all of the equine industry, and what you see is there are a lot of problems, and rescue is no different. And you kind of get swept under the rug as part of a problem until you've really proven yourself. And any industry breeds, shows, there are complaints. There's a list of here are common issues. And in rescue, in the horse industry, it's the same way. These are the things you've got to stay away from. You really have to try really hard to show the public, I know this is what you've seen and this is maybe what you're thinking, but that's not what's happening here. And we at this point, I would say, have an impeccable reputation, but it's been a hard-fought battle.
Sure. As I would imagine it is. It's quite the climb. So how does an organization like yours prove itself? And, for anybody who's out there looking to support a rescue organization, how do they know what's reputable and what's not?
Well, one of the biggest things, I think, is follow-up on horses that come in. What I notice that happens in some organizations that maybe aren't ran the way that I feel they should be is a horse comes in, where does it go? Do you ever see a follow-up on that horse? Do you see the improvement in that horse? Because most donors are following the social media or the websites of the organization. So it's very easy to just say, hey, I remember in February you took in this horse. Hey, how are they doing now? I'd love to see a photo. Little things that sound small, but if you start asking those questions, unfortunately what you'll find is there's not always a lot of follow-up. Knowing that when you donate, that you're seeing evidence of your money at work. How many horses are coming in? Is it clear they're getting vet care? Is the rescue real transparent about who their vets are, who their farriers are? Do they seem to be flipping horses for a profit, or do you know that horse has been with them long enough to have been vetted and trained? And are the fees sensible where you don't believe that they're actually trying to get a horse in quickly and put it right back out the door? Looking at the adoptive process, is there an application? Is there any indication that there's a contract that's intended to really care for that horse in the long term to keep that horse safe? A lot of public events where you can meet these people. And while we don't operate a public facility because we work with law enforcement, we do have public events to where you can come out certain days and so forth. So you really need to have a lot of transparency there and feel comfortable asking that organization questions about the horses and feeling like you're going to get an answer and know where that horse that maybe you saw in the spring is come winter. And with Heart of Phoenix, we've really worked hard to make sure if you ask us where a horse came in 7 years ago, there's no question we know where, and we can produce current photos or let you know, hey, the horse passed on, something very clear. So just really being dedicated to the horse and letting the donors know you gave money to the organization, you care about these animals, here they are today. I think that alone will get you leaps and bounds toward making sure you're talking to or working with or supporting a reputable organization.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So the transparency is a big thing, and you touched on it. You said it. Thank goodness for social media now, because it makes that stuff so much easier to track, so long as folks are keeping up kind of with the social media stuff. Because I know even through our own page, it's so much easier to keep in touch with other clients, past clients, people who rode with me 10 years ago or something like that. It's so easy for them to check in, to touch base. And I'm sure it's the same with your rescue horses as well.
Well, yeah, it absolutely is. And, there are people that remember donating to an intake 3 years ago, and they do follow up and say, how are they? And, we're always so glad to be able to tell them. And I know that's why we've kept long-term donors, is that they know, even if they gave a small amount or a large amount, they know that it clearly went somewhere for the purpose they intended, and that they will know the end story of that horse, and that matters a great deal. The other thing that I feel like we do that may have helped us become more successful, and a direction that I wish more rescues went, and a direction I think donors and supporters should be looking for the rescues they support to be going in, is education. One of the things that I hope for is that in a decade, we don't need to have this level of rescue happening anywhere. But if people aren't proactive, it's never going to change. I don't want rescue to have to exist. I want it to be the last resource, not the obvious end for so many horses to end up in. And so I think that rescue needs to really start becoming an active part of the equine industry, not a fringe part, the dirty part, the unfortunate part, but work as a proactive organization to make better riders, make people make better selections with their horses, make people make fewer mistakes when they have their horses, create fewer problems in their horses, and learn more about just overall equine care, so that horses don't cycle through so many owners, thus they end up in rescue or in negligent situations less often. And it's a direction I feel like rescue's starting to turn, but until the bulk of organizations do, we're not really going to see 10 years from now fewer horses in need. And so, if somebody is looking for an organization, I think having a clear plan and a clear educational focus and a proactive focus is so important, or we're going to be doing this same level of rescue in 10 years or 20 years. And I'd like to believe that it can be made better by bringing the whole equine community in to say, we love horses. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make more conscientious owners and better horses. Gotcha. So that they're with their owners longer.
Yeah, gotcha. So less of a, like you said, kind of a last-ditch sort of an avenue, and more of a resource or a network for general education and care.
I mean, that's what I hope, and that's what we try to do. That type of thing takes more funding toward, people like to donate to crisis cases. What people want to fund as a donor is the emaciated horse with a broken leg coming into the rescue. However, what really is most effective are things like gelding clinics and health clinics and riding clinics and training for the person who's about to give up on this horse they have because they don't know enough, but they want to stick it out. It's harder to get funding for those things, and so an organization has to be larger before they really can direct funding in that way. Because if you put out a request for funding, hey, I need donations for this riding clinic so we can make the people in our community better able to keep the horses they have, or better able to adopt the average horse that is out there, people think, well, that doesn't seem like an emergency need. And so just kind of changing the way that horse people who support rescue think is very helpful, because think proactively. Don't think at the last minute when the horse is already so far gone that saving the horse is very difficult. You know, think when people are donating about what are we doing to make tomorrow better for horses and the equine community in general. And that line of thought, which, like I said, I don't think a lot of rescues are talking that way, but I do think it's shifting that direction, will, I think, ultimately impact the whole equine industry in a really positive way.
Well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're taking care of the problem before it becomes a problem.
I mean, and that's what we hope to do, because what happens when you work in this area, something I know I've talked to you about before, but, you know, in West Virginia as well as Kentucky, there are thousands of abandoned horses all over reclaimed mines or active mine sites, thousands just in one county, Mingo County. So we can look at that, and if we aren't going to be proactive, that's never going to change. We can't go in there and move 2,000 horses in one area that are really, the horses live under extreme circumstances. The winters are harsh. There's no grass that grows. They breed without discrimination. It's a really hard thing to ever see in person. And I guess running into things like that really are kind of hopeless made me at some point say we really have to change the way we're thinking about helping horses and being advocates for horses. This I can't go in and do a thing about, but we can change this area, and in 10 years there will be fewer if we are really working with the equine community and not staying on the outside of it, not really being so difficult, not being so, I suppose, for lack of a better word, maybe judgmental about every aspect that we don't agree with, maybe as an advocate, where we are not making our money in the equine industry, but we're volunteering, but try to make rescues, not just rescues, but, you know, just part of the equine community as a resource. And I really think that that will set those, what seem like impossible situations that we face in Appalachia, something that over time are addressable where they're not right now. And so that just changed the way I thought about it. I began thinking we'll be there when no one else was. And that's not really an answer in the long term.
Right. Because then there's no adjustment before that to make it unnecessary to be there when no one else is. Yeah,
I know, exactly. And, so there's an initiative that's kind of being funded right now by a large kind of power player in animal advocacy, and the idea is the Right Horse Initiative. And they were talking about this, but over the past probably 18 months or so, I've done numerous blogs on that same issue, and it's hopefully will catch on. There's a lot of non-rescue players involved. The American Horse Council is one of the partners, but to just push this education out there. And I think what we are experiencing, which I imagine you would agree, is we're at a good rider deficit in America. Most horses are not ever going to be bomb-proof beginner horses. And unfortunately, a lot of people that have an interest in horses, that's what they're looking for, and that's where they want to stay.
Right.
And that will never work to solve the unwanted horse issue that we face, because the average horse is never going to be for them, and the average rider will never work for the average horse. And so I don't know why it's taken so long for that really to be the conversation, but I'm glad it's happened now. And because I am contacted so often by people that are well-meaning, and I know what they're wanting, and I know that financially these people could care for a horse and probably would be dedicated, until we're in that vein of thought of, that's a great idea. Let's start working with the trainer. Let's start getting lessons. Let the rescue help facilitate that and get you where you need to be, so the average horse that's adoptable or for sale or in need of a home can work for you. so that it's a successful relationship and you still have horses 20 years from now, and then your kids want to have horses and they're capable riders. It's just this, this process of connecting all those dots and making better horse people.
Right. Well, and I think whenever we get that accomplished, you'll have so many more, I would say so many more riders that will actually stay in the industry, because there's so many that we see, or that I see through clinics and stories of folks just as I travel down the road, that they get so frustrated, they get so scared, worried, just because they're not yet capable riders. So then they end up just getting out of it, or the horses just sit in the backyard for, who knows how long, and who knows where they end up.
Well, and there's a trainer that I know named Aubrey Adkins, and her and I had a conversation where I wrote a blog that ended up shared pretty widely, and it was making a beginner safe horse dangerous. And that was very telling when she talked about being able to impart to a person who comes and takes lessons on a horse that under her supervision and with her guidance is safe for anyone. And they decide when they believe they should buy a horse and take that horse home, and how often those horses come back to her no longer safe.
Yes.
Because, and so even when we are creating safe horses, which, preaching to the choir here, I'm sure, but the horse that has once been safe can be turned into what essentially is a killer in the hands of a person that's unskilled and decided that getting to beginner status was enough, and then they needed to take that horse home. And it happens so often, and sometimes I'm amazed at how well the horses somehow muddle through.
Yeah.
But I have seen some really bad things happen to really good horses in years past and in recent times, where I knew the horse, and I knew the horse was a safe horse, and what 6 months in the hands of a well-meaning, ignorant person or beginner person did to that horse. And then somehow the horse comes maybe to the rescue or to somebody to try to be fixed again. And so, and as you say, it doesn't create a culture of wanting to spend decades in the horse industry. They get upset, they get scared, they quit, and the horse gets into a pipeline that goes who knows where, but it's often nowhere good. And it may have started out as a really great horse. And, we just really want to see something happen where all of the equine industry starts thinking about that, including rescues, and really working toward, because what's going to happen as time goes and the number of people owning horses is shrinking, it doesn't bode well for the equine industry in any way. So just convincing people, whether they're training or doing clinics or they're showing or they're boarding, whatever, giving lessons, whatever they're doing, to really have that proactive mindset and start thinking about, are we putting better riders out there? Are we putting riders out there that can actually offer a home to the average horse? And even not in rescue, that's very relevant to the overall equine industry in the next 10 years or so.
Right, absolutely. Because then when they're not, they, well-meaning or not, which of course I'm sure most of them are well-meaning, but the horses still end up kind of in that downward spiral, just because of lack of knowledge or resources or capabilities or whatever at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at shows and been around and heard people that maybe they started a horse. Maybe they got the horse in when he was 3 or 4, and they knew how he was when he was 7 or 8. And then the horse resurfaces, and they'll say, well, you wouldn't believe what a great horse he was. But then, we went through this person, now the horse is whatever. I mean, maybe he's crippled. Maybe he's just dangerous. Maybe he's just not a cooperative partner. It's hard to say, but I hear that all the time. And I think sometimes I hear that from people that should be major parts of this area's equine community. And we can't just settle for that. I mean, we're all responsible. Anyone who's ever loved a horse or decided that that's where their living was going to be, really should feel a sense of responsibility to make sure that we pass on that same love of horses to the next generation, and make sure that there's a really good chance that it's going to be better than this one. And so, that's kind of essentially what Heart of Phoenix hopes to do. We really don't just want to be the person animal control calls to come out and pick up the broken horse, and we certainly do that. But if we're still doing that at the same number in 10 years, we, as well as the others in, the horse industry in this area, will have failed.
That makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So that's going to bring me on to a question here, kind of as an offshoot of this. How then do you qualify adopters for these horses that you take in?
Well, it's a long process. Honestly, we usually do not accept people who are true beginners. What we do is when you apply, it's kind of like adopting a child. I'll not lie to you. It's a big process, and it's kind of daunting. What we ask for is a professional equine reference, your vet, your farrier, 2 personal references, and then we're going to talk to you, as well as you're going to fill out information that lets us at least see who you think you are as a rider or an owner. And from that, we're going to tell you the horses that we have that we think will work, or we're going to say if you're working with a trainer. That comes up a lot. And I will say, because of the process we put people through, people that come to us often, if they are somewhat beginner riders, they are usually boarding with in a training facility. So that's helpful. Our application is set up that it's asking as if you already are a horse owner. If you don't have any of that information, we're typically not going to be able to work with you unless you are in a facility and have been taking lessons and you're going to be boarding and you have a mentor. If you don't have a mentor, we will not adopt to a new horse owner for the most part. I mean, if you're talking about a miniature horse that's going to be a pet, perhaps. If you have a really good, small animal reputation, vet reputation, where there's no question we're going to care for the animal, but there's not a concern of you being hurt, and so forth. So we kind of make it so structured that you're already thinking in that way. Maybe you came to the page and you're going to apply and you were a beginner, but by the time you look at that application, if you are someone who's not learning, you're probably going to decide we're not the organization for you. However, we try to make it to where those people will still reach out to us and talk to us so we can say, hey, how about taking some lessons? Do you want to volunteer and see what you can learn? We don't want to kind of crush that spark of interest. You really want to facilitate them becoming future owners.
Sure.
But not set them up for failure right off. So egos get in the way, and people do get upset and offended that you insinuate that because they rode on a trail ride when they were 7 once that they're not an expert. And they get very angry with us, but I'm pretty diplomatic, and I do try, but there are just some people that will not be reasoned with, and I have to let those ships sail.
Right.
But we try our very best to redirect people that aren't quite ready.
Right.
And we try our very best to give them a good match if they are ready. And because we retain ownership of our horses at Heart of Phoenix, so it's essentially a lifetime, or as long as it can be, lease. We don't want the horse to come back. It's hard on the horse, and it's hard for us to make the space, and so we want it to be a good match. So we just try to, and we are always changing the process. For me to tell you the process we have now is what we had 3 years ago. No, it's been a learning process for us as well, and just trying to make sure that the most adoptions that can work in the long term, the better, and doing whatever we could to make that happen. So.
Well, and I like the way you talk about, folks having some sort of structure in their education, some sort of mentors, that sort of thing. And then if they're not currently qualified, you kind of give them the invitation to come out and work with you and to work with the rescues as a volunteer. So that kind of puts you in the mentor category for them. That could then, I would assume, potentially put them up to a place of being an eligible adopter. Yeah?
And well, yes, and we've had that happen multiple times, and it's so far to date, that has always actually ended up being some of our best placements. And there are certain people that have volunteered and been great volunteers and that have decided that owning a horse is not something they can do or feel comfortable with, but they love them and like to just come out and be involved. And so it lets people know, they don't jump in too quickly, and they really figure out what capacity they need horses in their life. And sometimes it's more than volunteering offers, and sometimes it's just volunteering, and that's enough. So that's been a great thing. But also, I've heard a lot of feedback from friends of theirs that have then, maybe they've waited or they've contacted us first. So it does spread kind of this proactive approach over time. And, sometimes it does feel like emptying, the ocean with a teaspoon, but it's some progress. And having a really good social media presence and putting out a lot of information, because that's the age we live in.
Yeah.
We have gotten tremendous readership on our blogs and different things that we post. And as a result, people far outside of our area have given us a lot of reason to believe that alone creates a big impact. I read this and I realized that's who I am, and I realized this, and they may be in California or Washington or Canada. It's hard to say. But sometimes it's just this type of information is not being put out there. I don't feel like that conversation of being the rider you need to be before you get a horse has been as much a part of the public conversation of horses as it should have been previously, and probably still isn't where it needs to be at all, but at least I hear about it now. And so, doing clinics and things, I at least assume, hopefully you're exposed to people who are wanting to learn. That's why they're there.
Right, exactly.
But that's not, unfortunately, the equine community at large.
Right.
And so just talking about the need to be the rider your horse or your potential horse deserves kind of changes everything in the common sector of horsemen or wannabe horsemen.
Right. Well, it is a mind shift. It's more. Somebody said it. Maybe it was you. Maybe it was you that said it in a conversation that we had. But they. Anyway, the conversation went something to the effect of, so many people talk about wanting to get a horse, maybe wanting to rescue a horse for what it'll do for them and how it'll make them feel, rather than the reality of they're doing that for how they can help the horse to be, or how they can help the horse to feel. And I think the education goes a lot into that, because, this whole idea of horsemanship, it has to be less about us and more about the horses.
Well, and that's so much what I encounter, is that people are looking, especially in rescue. I mean, certainly even volunteers, people come because they need something from this. Mm-hmm. But what really happens if they stick it out, it really changes in their mind, and they really start to think about this obligation to see this horse where it needs to go. And that just, I hope that we see more potential owners and more owners stop thinking about how the horse feels that need in them, and really think about them as large, feeling, emotional, complex creatures. Mm-hmm. And, let that guide more of how they work with their horse, or let that guide how they decide when they purchase or adopt a horse, what they really are able to offer, and what kind of horse they need. So, the kind of the other side of the industry is, so that conversation is more about the people who don't know, and maybe they're not qualified. But then we are doing, which I know you're aware, this trainer challenge, the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off. And I feel like that hits a different audience. What we wanted from this is not just to get really solid foundations on horses that had no previous training. Certainly that is extremely important, but it was to take people that the horse industry in our area respect as good horsemen and horsewomen, that show and deal with what we think of as valuable horses, and to take rescue horses and show what they can do, and then hit that audience that rescue maybe doesn't hit. That was really my hope, was to turn the table of what a rescue horse is. And at least in our area, a common issue was that if the horse ended up in a bad situation, the horse failed rather than a person failed the horse. And it really is no indication of the quality of the animal or the mind of the animal. Often it was, or almost always it is, a person didn't see through their obligation. And so it's been really kind of this beautiful thing to me on this coast where it had not been done in our area, where you took these horses and you have these trainers showing that, I mean, they could have taken no horse any further than some of these trainers are taking these horses, no matter where the horse came from, no matter the nothing. It would have made no difference that this was a rescue, where this horse was born out on a strip mine in Kentucky, or this horse was starved to death in Mingo County, locked in somebody's carport. But essentially, that these trainers can take them, and with the right method and so forth, take the horse through so much in 100 days. And I hope dispel the idea that rescue is somehow the horse has done something wrong, or that means they have no value. And I think doing that repeatedly over years will change the minds of lifetime horse owners, maybe multi-generation horsemen and women, to maybe stop and think, don't just discredit this animal because it ended up in a bad situation. They're viable partners for anybody, and that hopefully will open up a whole new realm of adoption and partnership with people that maybe they offer lessons, maybe they, various things where maybe that's not a vein we're getting to adopt into, but our horses need homes, and whatever, we can do to let people that are already in the industry that are knowledgeable know, don't discount the horse because it's a rescue.
Right.
I think that just carries tremendous weight, and hopefully for years to come will.
Right. Well, and I think you're right. There's so many people that have this idea that because it's a rescue, that means that it's a throwaway, and if it's a throwaway, there must be something wrong with it, or it must have done something wrong, and that doesn't always have to be the case. So I think that's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off?
Well, so we, August 25th and 26th in Winfield, we have 7 trainers. Originally started with 8, and Nicole, that you know very well, has decided that she feels like the colt, the young gelding that she has from us, that he needs more time, and she's really been kind about that, and so that's awesome. So we, instead of having 8, we'll have the 7 trainers will compete. Michael Lyons is one of the judges. Tim Klein is another, and then Susan Sunday, who is an officer of Heart of Phoenix. They will make up our team that will judge. The horses will go through something pretty similar to the Extreme Mustang Makeover process over a 2-day period. Okay. And then we will ultimately, we'll have a youth winner, and then we will have, a first place. And it's been an amazing thing because we really don't usually see horses taken this far. You're certainly asking more of the horse in a competition like this than the average adopter ever would as a trail horse. So it's so nice to see these horses, some of them that we literally pulled out of, horrifying situations at body scores of 1 that barely were able to recover, be able to do what they're doing now, and to hear the feedback from the trainers, and the appreciation for the minds of some of these horses and the abilities. People that have worked with horses from all kinds of places and all kinds of values, but to see that they're genuinely impressed and have enjoyed this, and the way that they've put so much into it has been tremendous for us. I mean, I think it's the greatest thing we've ever done. I've done so many things with horses and rescue, but this, to me, hands down, the greatest thing we've ever done. And so what we did was we paired it with a show that we've done every year. So this is the 5th annual show, and this will be the first annual face-off. And so that 2-day event will have the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off running in Winfield, West Virginia in one arena, and then the show will be taking place up until the end at the freestyle, and then that will be kind of all eyes on the trainers as they finish up. So I expect a really big turnout. If people are listening and they're in an area where driving distance between Huntington, West Virginia and Charleston, West Virginia is possible, it's a beautiful, really nice facility. People are welcome to come show, but just to come and see this, I think will be well worth the drive from wherever anyone is, even
That's
Washington.
Awesome. That's awesome. It does sound like a lot of fun, and I know I've tried, a little bit in some rare moments to try to catch up and see what's going on with all of the horses. And it does. It sounds like there's been some amazing progress with a lot of these horses. Even with, like we talked about, Nicole's little horse that she drew, he's given her some challenges, and she's done a couple videos and some photo updates with him of the things that she's doing with him. And I know she and I have talked about him as well. And what she's doing to try to help him to come as far along as he possibly can while he's with her, even though knowing that she's kind of going to take that road with him where she's not going to compete. But it sounds like there are some fantastic things going on with these horses, and that's awesome. That's awesome to see.
Well, I mean, and ultimately, what we hope is that it provides exposure to trainers that we believe do a great job, and that most, if not all, the horses will get adopted, at the end of the competition, and really set the precedent for more people to want to do it next year. And we just, just overall, it's just been amazing. I can't even express it enough. If somebody's out there and they want to go on to Appalachian Trainer Face-Off page and you look over what some of the trainers have done, and I'm just starting this week as we're kind of winding down, I'm starting to share the before stories of the horses, which I had not done with photos. And knowing the type of work we do and the horrible things we see, you can imagine what it looks like to juxtapose these horses now performing at the level they are with an intake picture tied to a tree, starving, with a carcass of another horse dead beside of it. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. And hopefully that just helps all the way around and kind of dispel the myth of what rescue means and what they can do, but just really powerful for the audience that comes from the trainers. These trainers all had followings and clients and things, and for them to have come over and to be able to see this, I think it's just priceless. I really do. And we really just can't wait to see it all, play out. It's kind of like, I don't know, I'm kind of I'm a hard person to get super excited. I usually just do what I have to do, and I try to do it really well. But this particular event has just been, it's just been amazing. That's all I can say. It's tremendous.
That's awesome. It has been great to see it all kind of playing out. I know we had chatted, I think before you even made an announcement about it happening, we had chatted about it starting to come to fruition, and then to see how it's been unfolding has just been great. So one more time for folks that are listening, when and where is this final deal taking place for the Face-Off?
It is August 25th and August 26th in Winfield, West Virginia.
Fantastic. And the show, who is that open to?
It is open to anybody. It's a fun show. There's a lot of game-type classes and a lot of casual classes, but no matter what level, no matter what you ride, there are classes for you both days.
Awesome. Great. So if anyone is in driving distance of that, I know I would definitely recommend for folks to go and catch that with or without their horses, because I'm sure that's going to be a ton of fun. And having had the chance to hang out with you guys and the volunteers through Heart of Phoenix Equine Rescue, I'm sure it's going to be a fun time with a little mayhem and a lot of laughs had by all.
All the fun. We have all of the fun.
That's fantastic. So, moving on from here, I've got just kind of a few more questions on my primary list here, and you've piqued my interest always. I think it's kind of one of my, I don't know if I want to call it one of my favorite topics that you discuss, but to me it's the most intriguing, and that is the topic of the mine horses and these thousands of horses, if that number is right. Thousands of horses. What? Tell us more about that
yes,
stuff.
Indeed.
It's
Well,
mind-blowing.
I'll tell you, so southern West Virginia, if you ever visit, especially the very rural parts, it's very mountainous, it's very isolated, it's hard to traverse, it's hard to get vehicles in and out of certain parts, and it's got a really interesting sense of community where outsiders really just, they don't know what's going on, and you're kind of rejected when you go there. And that sounds like a stereotype, except I'm from that area, so I can speak very much to it being the case. And so it was something that I learned about probably 2011. And at first, I had no idea the scope of the situation. Even though I had been to the counties that deal with this, you have to travel, an hour, 2 hours out on four-wheeler to get to these old mine sites. And I started hearing reports and getting pictures, and I was just seeing gruesome things. And so I just had to see and find out for myself. Well, what happened was when I started talking about it on social media, local people rejected it as true. People just did not believe it. It had never been talked about in the United States. Now it's common information. The Humane Society of the United States is aware. The ASPCA has tried to work to do things in Kentucky to change legislation to where the horses can be helped. So now it's a nationally known issue. But let me tell you, back in 2011, it wasn't. And I would get death threats over it because they didn't want people to know, because a lot of times what it was happening is horse traders were managing the herds to some degree, even though they didn't really own them. And they would go in and they would round up the horses at the end of, going into winter and maybe haul them to Sugar Creek or haul them, to a sale, because that was a little bit of money in their pocket. So they didn't like that I was drawing attention to this. The issue, though, came to be more involved when land companies started reaching out to me for an answer. What happens is these sites are, through the EPA, they're reclaimed. There has to be a certain amount of forage and trees and so forth replanted, and the horses were and still are destroying the reclamation process. So the landowners were getting fined by the EPA because nothing was being reclaimed because the horses are eating everything. And that's when I got the first numbers. I knew there were a lot, but I didn't know how many until the land companies met with me. And we're talking some of the wealthiest, the biggest landowners on the part, in the eastern United States. Major money here. Met with me in Charleston, had me come, and I sat down with their attorneys and some of the representatives, and they said in Mingo County alone they had numbered 2,000.
That's incredible.
And this is 2014. So then they said, well, I told them my pitch, my answer, which was a long-term, expensive process. It was a complicated process. It wasn't, okay, we're going to go pick up 2,000 horses, because clearly we couldn't. So, and that was just one county. So what they did was ask me to come speak at their landowners conference in Charleston, and there's about 300 people attend this conference. That's once a year. And again, you're talking tremendous wealth, land barons. I give a presentation. I never hear from them again because the answer wasn't easy. So I took some trips out and documented the herds, and Cindy at Central Virginia Horse Rescue, really well-known rescue in Virginia, came up to see it because in 2014 it still wasn't accepted the way it is today. That now you've had numerous people film and go out and highlight it, and it's understood to be now. But 2014 was still in that transitional period of, is this an urban legend?
Sure.
So she drove up, I don't know, maybe 8 hours from Virginia, and said, take me out and let me see him. Not because she didn't believe me, but she said, I want to see with my eyes what you are showing people. And we went, and she said, I will never be the same after seeing this. It's just, you go through this extremely poor area, and you drive for so far on these little roads out onto the tops of these reclaimed mountaintop removal sites. As far as you can see are horses. A lot of them are starving, a lot of foals on, the sides of mares and a lot of carcasses. They hunt them. They you know, the local people hunt them sometimes. So you'll see them, you know, carcasses where they've been, shot with bows, and people chase them with
they're
four-wheelers.
hunting them to stop them from destroying the land, or they're...
My understanding is they're hunting them because there will be too many stallions, and they're kind of managing the herd.
Gotcha.
And the locals really like the horses. It doesn't matter that they're in poor condition. It doesn't matter. They don't know any better. They just they think of them as the Mustangs of the East. And they get very upset when you talk about doing anything with the horses. And then the horse traders that steal, because they're local to these areas, they are very aggressive about you going out. It's no longer safe for me to go. I've just made too much about it, and so I cannot safely go anymore, and no one will take. I'm willing to go because I still want to record what's happening, but nobody that I know will take me out. They are afraid for different reasons. It's very volatile. Now,
I can just picture you gearing up like Rambo, you know, and putting
I would do it.
the makeup on your face and some sort of Brenda Badass theme song playing as you strut out into the banjo country of abject poverty out there.
I mean, I would do it. And every winter I ask other people to take me, you know, because the thing is you have to go out by four-wheeler, and you can't walk. There's no way to walk. You would never be able to even find where you were going. And, you know, so you have to have a local person that knows those little roads and knows...
Because the terrain is so challenging?
It's so challenging, and there's so many little roads. You would end up lost and never make it out. I mean, just you couldn't do it. And so on the flip side, Kentucky has made a lot of progress. Kentucky Equine Humane is one organization that's been able to remove a lot of horses in Kentucky in the last few years. And actually one of our face-off horses came from a roundup in Kentucky by Kentucky Equine Humane.
Oh, wow.
He's competing, or Adam Black of Ohio has done an amazing job with him, and he was born probably second generation at least, if not more, feral on a strip mine in Kentucky. But Kentucky has changed the laws, and they've been really accepting to people coming in. It's just a different culture is all I can say in certain parts where they've been able to work. But in the areas in West Virginia, it's just not happened yet. But we are talking about thousands and thousands of horses. And there have been a few times we've been able to remove them because they get out into the road. I mean, you can imagine in an area that's rural and it's mountainous, what happens when a vehicle hits a horse.
Oh, yeah.
It's I get photos all the time, and they come down in the winter to lick the salt from the road. So it's when everything's dead, and it happens. And I've just gotten photos of the most horrible things from Mingo County of horses being hit multiple at a time. They destroy the vehicles. I can't say that people have died or haven't, but they certainly have been in vehicles that when I see the photos, I wouldn't be surprised if someone had died in the accidents. And the roads are just serpentine, so you never know. You can come around a corner and there's a herd.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I had photos of 30, 40 horses across roadways where school buses travel in the morning when it's early. And so, you know, in the grand scheme, what I see the face-off doing, if we can ever get legislation to allow it, or if we can work really well in Kentucky, is to bring attention through the retraining and the roundup of these horses, because I don't know what's going to happen if something doesn't give. And it's a very hard thing. You know, I see neglect of the worst kind constantly, but it's different when you go out and as far as you can see are horses that you know are going to starve through the winter and that already are in poor shape in the summer. And to know, and they come up to you because a lot of times they have just been abandoned, and they do remember, and they look at people, and they follow you around.
So that was going to be my next question, was how they get there. So they're abandonment cases.
Originally. And it's funny if you go out and see, so I would say 50% are probably abandoned or roughly that at some point. And then the rest, you know, certainly are first, second, third, who knows how many generations born feral. And most of the time, because the conditions are very poor, they don't survive a very long time. But the ones that do are herds that won't approach you. So when we went out that one particular time with Cindy Smith from Virginia, and we documented so much of these herds, every herd has a stallion and multiple mares, and they'll have multiple foals. And then how that herd interacts kind of tells you how new they are or to being there. But what we found is all of the herds would come up to us except a herd of what really were ponies. And we had a local miner with us who actually was so afraid that people would know he brought us there, he wouldn't let me put his face in the photos. And he was actually just out of the underground mining in his outfit covered in coal. So the photos that I have
remember seeing some of those photos. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's amazing. It tells a story about West Virginia that's beyond the scope of this conversation. But what he said was that herd was decades feral. And so they were very small, shaggy, little brown, dark colored ponies. You couldn't get within half a mile of that herd. And those are the herds that somehow have adapted and make it. The other herds, while there could be a couple generations there, they just don't thrive. The big horses, we get a lot of walking horses, so a lot of Tennessee walkers, a lot of gaited horses, a lot of color. There's a lot of color in those herds, and that's how you kind of know this is a more recent drop-off. And maybe they'll make it through a winter or two, but chances are if they're going to be multi-generation feral, it's going to be one of those herds that are much smaller and clearly have adapted over some decades to living out there.
Wow. That's that's fascinating. I mean, it kind of always makes my jaw drop every time you talk about it, because I've seen feral horses. I've seen, kind of our wild horses out west and up in Canada and things like that, but nothing like what you're describing at all. I mean, and even the bands of horses that I've seen have been very small in numbers, a dozen, 2 dozen maybe or more. So I cannot even imagine.
Well, Patrick, next time you're up, we can tactical warfare it out and go out and we'll see them.
There we go. We'll both put on our Rambo outfits and
yes. We'll be like tactical princesses. It'll be great.
Yes, for sure. Speaking of conversations or topics beyond the scope of this conversation.
Oh Lord.
Oh goodness! Wow. So on a happier note, because that's always kind of a sombering topic there. Can you tell us, through Heart of Phoenix, what was maybe your biggest, your most dramatic success story, or maybe there was a couple?
Well, there have been a lot, but the one that I always come back to is simple. It's simply chosen because of the sheer number of people that know this story. So therefore, it must, because I know them all personally. Sometimes they're all kind of very dramatic to me. But back in 2012, funny story. This has some humor in it. My mother was dating Fabio, and we had a derecho. I'm sitting there talking to Fabio in Huntington, West Virginia. The electric goes out. A tree falls on my truck. It's a really bad time to go on a horse rescue. And this was July. It was July 3rd, I believe.
I have to interrupt for a second here, because I'm bursting inside with just terrible sense of humor. So my friend Warwick Schiller has this line where he makes this comment: "Beware of flying ducks."
Right.
And so knowing now this relationship or this connection to Fabio, you know exactly what I'm laughing about inside, trying hard to contain it. So your mother was dating Fabio. Was this pre or post flying ducks?
It was post the pigeon episode or whatever it was. Yeah, it was post. And I will not say maybe those jokes came up throughout the time that he was there. And,
maybe they did, or maybe they didn't. I'm sure.
I can't say, but... So here's Fabio. The electric's gone out. He's asking us if he can get us anything. I get a call from animal control about a case. It ends up rolling into the next day. It's July 4th, and they have a horse that they have seized that's down at the shelter. And no one's working. It's July 4th. I go out there, and I climb the 15-foot chain link fence in Huntington. The horse is down. She cannot get up. She's beyond a body score of 1. She's maybe a 0.5. And I'm just sure that there's no